All right, welcome back to another episode of the Blasters and Blades podcast. So, hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Yes, I know I just repeated that name. It's so you don't forget it. So, it's just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies, a place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So, without further ado, let's introduce you to our guest, Christopher Ruocchio. Did I pronounce it right this time?
Yes, you did. Yeah, thanks for
Outstanding.
having me.
I did it 12 times the last time we recorded you, but that was when our previous hosting platform hated itself and like committed Harry Carey or something, and we had to find StreamYards. StreamYards is great, by the way, people. We love them. They make it idiot proof, JR proof even. But so we interviewed you before about this, and it didn't go on the air. So we're gonna try it again. And that meant this is number 13 where I say his name and finally got it right. So
Well, I'll try to ramble less this time too.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. We were even sober last time, so it's not like the bar's very low. But can you tell us a little bit about you, who you are?
Yeah, so my name's Christopher Ruocchio. I'm the author of the Sun Eater science fantasy series from Daw Books, and I'm the junior editor at Bane Books, where I've worked with sci-fi fantasy writers like David Weber, Larry Correia, Lois Bujold for, 6 years now. I've been doing that. I started as an intern in college, and I've been just going straight on through. So it's a little bit.
You finally talked him into paying you, though, I hope.
Yes, yeah, after the first year.
Okay, that's smart.
So yeah, it took a minute, but they finally, I graduated. I don't have to do the grocery store runs anymore. So
Do you still have to get the coffee and sweep the floor, though?
no, we got someone for that now. I moved up just one notch. Yeah.
All right, so pretty soon they're going to let you make the fries.
But it's a small company, so one notch is a big notch.
Yeah, the downside, of course, is it's the only notch I'm going to get. So I'm at fries, but I'm never going to be a proper line cook.
Oh, dang it. Maybe one day they'll let you wash the lettuce. And if you don't get the reference, people, you're probably too young, and we forgive you. But
I was actually worked in a restaurant for 8 years, so I thought that's where we were going.
Oh, no, Coming to America. The fake McDonald's.
Yeah. Okay.
Excellent movie. You should watch it. They're making a part 2, I guess. I don't know.
It's out.
They made it. They made it already.
Yeah.
It's already out.
Okay, well, we're not a movie review show today. We might do sci-fi movies, but not that one. So now is the fun part. So we're going to ask Cisca, how did you find Mr. Ruocchio?
I met him when he was just the Bane intern, actually. It was at a LibertyCon, and he had just been announced as the Bane intern. And I looked at him and I went, "So how does that feel?" And he goes, "It's a little intimidating because I have these people now coming trying to find me." And they all know who I am, and I don't know who they are. Like, you knew the names. You were very well versed in the literature you were going to be working with. But you physically could not tell the difference between like David Weber and John Ringo if we held up pictures. Yeah. And they're very different if anybody's ever seen them.
Well, in his defense, one thing we learned when we interviewed Declan Finn is that if you just put on a weird hat or a bright colored jacket, people just magically can't recognize you anymore when you take it off. So he had the Clark Kent thing going in his defense.
That is the truth. Declan's a snappy dresser. So
is that bright orange? I think it's orange. I'm colorblind, but it's bright.
Yeah, it is. Or is it yellow? It's been a minute.
It's a yellow blazer.
He just told me, and I thought he said orange because I can't tell the difference. But
I don't think Declan can either.
Is he colorblind too? Wow. Okay, we're gonna have to get him on now that we can do fantasy. Speaking of, so I actually found Christopher through you last time, and then since then we nerd out all the time over books and philosophy and history, and Elvis even likes him, so that's a plus. So yeah, it just released today at the time of recording. Today is Thursday. Our episode where we interviewed author Aaron A.C. Haskins, and it came up about the Bane Free Library, but he's a new author for you, and he got a little bit confused. So I thought, since you work for them, you might take a minute and sort of clarify all of the perks that you do for your readers before we jump into talking about your books and you.
Yeah, sure. Well, the Bane Free Library is something we've been doing since I think the 90s. We actually did ebooks before they were called ebooks. And what we do is we have a curated collection of books, usually first in series, some science fiction, some fantasy, some alternate history, even some nonfiction pieces we publish on the website, short story collections too, that are up there absolutely for free and DRM free. So you can copy them, move them to whatever device you want. and it's a great way if you are between authors, between reads, to find something new. Usually, as I say, these are the first in series going back, to the 90s even. So you'll find something that'll get you started with 20 volume adventure. I think the first 2 books of David Weber's Honor Harrington series, for instance, are up there for free. And I think it's the only one you get 2 books of for free up there. But you get that stuff. We also will put up our advanced reader copies in ebook form, not for free, but well in advance of the release. So if you find something you like and you don't want to wait for the new release, you don't have to. You can buy that ebook early. You can buy it in its original, unedited, unproofed form. So you can find, you'll find also that way that books sort of change. So you sometimes get to see the story in 2 kind of forms, which is kind of neat. But as I say, you don't get to wait. So those are 2 things that I can't think of another publisher, particularly a traditional mainstream publisher in science fiction, doing. I think those are unique to us. And it's a great way to get into some new reads.
Yeah, no, and they're actually a really good price point for what it is, because the advanced e-reader ebook copies tend to be about $15, which if you're buying that's less than a hardcover if you go into a Barnes and Noble or Amazon. So
yeah, and if it's something you really like, right, if it's a Larry Correia title, David Weber title, everything we do put out goes up early, or almost everything, I should say, goes up early in ebook form, so you can check that out well in advance, sometimes as much as like 8 months in advance. They're very, very outside. So it's kind of
all
cool
of your ebooks, right, are DRM free. So if I wanted to buy, say, We Shall Rise, which is going to be the new Black Tide Rising anthology, I could go in there and buy or if say I wanted to even buy Last Judgment by Ringo, and the one he did a couple months ago, I could go in and buy the ebook from you guys and get it in every format DRM free, right?
Pretty much, yeah. There are like 8 or 9 formats, I think, that are up there. You got all their big ones, right?
Yeah, and
EPUB. You can even get an RTF if you want, for whatever reason. But they are up there. And yeah, no, they're DRM free. Readers are not criminals. We have always felt that way. We've never put DRM in our books. We never will. Because, as I say, readers are not criminals in this way too. Just as with a print book, you could lend it to a friend. You can make a copy, and it's never hurt us to trust our readers, as shocking as that may seem to some people. So we feel pretty strongly about that.
So for listeners who might not know what DRM is, can you give them the Reader's Digest version?
Yeah, very briefly. It's a way of locking down the file so that you can't copy it or run it on parallel devices. It's a license, basically, so that it makes it harder to pirate or to duplicate or something like that. So you can't do the equivalent of Netflix password sharing, basically.
But what it means for me as somebody who I've switched devices before, and I could get it in whatever format I need it in and re-download it to my new Nook, for example.
Yeah.
But the other thing also I love that you guys have done for readers who are, and I've seen the posts in different reading groups of, hey, what way works best for you, the author, where you get the most profit value? And you guys actually, though, if it's a digital book you buy through Bane, you give a nicer percentage.
Yeah, well, whenever you sell an ebook, right, or whenever you sell a book, period, the merchant gets a cut, right? So Amazon gets their bit, or Barnes and Noble or whoever. If you buy ebooks directly from us, the merchant is the publisher, so there's not that extra split, and we forward the extra bit of that cut to the author instead, because we're still getting ours. So if you do want to support any of our authors, and you are an ebook reader, right, the best way to do that is to buy straight from Bane.com. The file will work on your Kindle or your Nook just fine. It'll work exactly like you get it from Amazon. You just have to buy it through a different website. It's BAEN.com, and the writers will get a little bit more out of that. Very often, actually, especially the bigger names, the authors will earn their advances out in that advanced reader copy stage. Since that book is selling at a premium, right? The author gets more if you buy that too. Worth noting. Because I know folks like to support their authors.
So do you do anything like that with your audiobooks before, and then we'll move on to talking about your books?
Yeah, no, the audios are all done through Tantor Media Recorded Books. So they're actually the publisher on that. We've provided them, you know, a sub-rights license to go and produce what they've already done. That said, there are actually 2 fully voiced and acted radio dramas that are for sale on Bane.com. Larry Correa's Last Christmas and Eric Flint's Islands. Just we did that as an experiment, sort of a fun thing to do. So you can get those. And if you've never listened to them, they are awesome. Tony Daniel did the screenplays for them, or I guess the sound plays, and really knocked it out of the park. They're awesome if you haven't listened to those.
So how much would it cost to get you to drive to our house to read the books to us?
Oh gosh. I'll have to get back to you on that one. Gotta crunch some numbers.
All right.
Figure out how much gas is going to be.
I don't want to think about that.
No.
All right. So we don't think about that. You get to ask him the important question, the religion question.
Okay. So on to religion. Since this is a space fantasy one, we're going to do both. What sci-fi religion first? Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Oh gosh. Man. I might be an atheist now. I'm an Orthodox Star Wars fan. Let's say.
Oh, he's so specific.
Well,
no, Orthodox only the original canon before Diz got his hands on it.
Let's say before 2015, yeah, because I was young enough to enjoy the prequels when they came out. I know that leaves a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. But
you're a baby. It's okay.
Yeah, the lightsaber fights were cool. Pod racing's awesome. I don't have anything else to say about that.
The nerd fights over the physics of the pod racing were hilarious. They're like, no, he would die. He would implode from the force. I'm like,
of course they would die.
Just relax and enjoy it.
It's fine. And the video game was great. I don't know if you ever played the N64 game. But it's awesome.
I think actually that's one of the few I did.
It's really great, and that really made those that movie good for me when I was a kid. Was playing that game, so I can't hate the prequels, but I don't have much nice to say about the new stuff. Rogue One was good, I guess, but let's leave it there.
Well, so on to fantasy: Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, or Potterverse.
Lord of the Rings. He said, quoting Henry Cavill in the meme. No, Lord of the Rings. Not even a contest for me. Tolkien really made me want to be a writer, and that's a pretty cliched thing. You hear a lot of writers say that, but I must have read Lord of the Rings 100 times when I was a kid. I got the audiobooks on CD. Right.
Oh wow.
And so I didn't have any other audiobooks because audiobooks when they were on CD were hugely expensive. But I had read The Hobbit when I was like 4 and I couldn't quite crack Lord of the Rings. So they got me the audio. They figured that'd be easier. My parents being the they here. And I must have gotten through to the end and then put the first CD back in and just kept going. No, I really, when I say 100 times, I'm not exaggerating.
As a parent, the nice thing is that is long enough. It's not like listening to Elsa over and over and over again.
No, there was nothing was let go, but there were songs. So occasionally be like, what is this Tom Bombadil nonsense? But you're like, nothing. It'll be over soon.
So I'm actually old enough. I remember when you could get book on tape, like actual tape.
I had a couple of those.
You could check them out from the Cracker Barrel while you were traveling, and it'd be the Cracker Barrel sort of worked like a Blockbuster for books on tape, and you could pick it up at one when you're traveling and drop it off at the other and return it.
Did they really?
Yeah,
oh man, I didn't know about that. That's awesome.
Wow, you are so old, JR.
I know. I'm dying of the baldness. It's unreal.
The blight.
I mean, my sons think that I fought the dinosaurs in the war. If that helps.
Oh,
like no, it's caveman. Those Neanderthals had to go. But, all right, so that's the important question, the religion question. Let's ask the next one, Doc.
Okay, so what was your first love, sci-fi or fantasy?
That's a tough one. Chronologically, science fiction, because I watched Star Wars first, but I still think of myself mostly as a fantasy fan. Because most of the hardcore reading that I did was fantasy. I was never like a big Asimov Clarke guy, right? So even the science fiction I was reading, I'm a huge Frank Herbert fan, and as my critics are quick to note. But so even the science fiction I was reading was very much more on the sort of fantastic end of things. But I spent so much time in Middle Earth, right, in a couple other fantasy series, Earthsea for a bit, and of course I was the right age for Harry Potter, but I've since sort of moved on, not from Middle Earth, but from some of the others, and so. Because I write books now, I tend to associate more with the books I was reading than the other properties to a certain extent, and so I think of myself more as a fantasy fan. But it really was the first Star Wars trilogy, the originals, which I actually watched on Laserdisc, so I can at least one up JR there a little bit. So I saw the originals before George mucked with them. I was probably the last kid in America who did. Which is why I say orthodox Star Wars fan. But that was really the beginning.
So
for
who
me.
shot first?
Han shot only. Greedo didn't shoot in the original.
Good answer.
I do remember that.
He just died.
So
good answer.
Thank you.
This is one that this and the pineapple on pizza are very important to him. So
we're not getting into your heresy tonight, all right, woman?
Wait, is Cisca pro pineapple?
She's pro pineapple, and I am not gonna. I barely tolerate this. I have to lie to myself and tell me she's real. She's normal.
Did my last name not clue you into that being unacceptable? Oh my gosh! I can't believe you would betray me this way.
I felt like this well before I knew you.
So sad.
Sorry.
So you mentioned that fantasy was your first love. So do you plan on coming at any point in your writing career and writing fantasy?
Oh yeah. I don't know when, because there's always a risk. At least with traditionally published authors, I don't know if this applies as much in the indie space, although maybe it applies more in changing tracks and becoming something else. It's like if your favorite metal band suddenly put out a jazz album, you'd be like, Judas Priest, what is this? It might be the best jazz album of all time, but it's not what you wanted, right? You alienate a lot of people. So I'm afraid to make that change immediately. But I do have a fantasy world I've been sitting on for a long time. I always, whenever people ask, I threaten to pull the map out, but it's tucked in the back corner over here. But I've been working on this setting for a while.
Okay. So
one day,
readers tend to be genre loyal more than anything, I think, and so they like what they like, and so a lot of people find that crossover isn't there. People like authors or people like Doc that read all over the place are rare, and I think. I
don't think it's as rare as you think it is. I think
numbers suggest otherwise if you track sales. But I also think like you get people above a certain age and everything wasn't available online. So like you had to hunt. And I mean, how often as kids did we go to the library? Oh man, I've read everything here. You don't have anything new yet? Let me go read the damn encyclopedia, because it's got interesting stuff. And so like I find that as things went more digital, it sort of catered more to that niche. And you see a shift in the market.
And at the very least, right, people will go to an author because that author is their space opera guy, right? Or this is my cyberpunk guy or whatever. I don't want, like if William Gibson did epic fantasy, I'd be like, what the heck why?
But there are some wonderful classic people like Jody or Casey Azell who they're genre fluid. They go across.
Oh, of course. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying I think there are a lot of readers who'd be perplexed, right?
I think the difference also for them is they started doing that early on in their writing.
Casey just had in writer ADD.
She had 2 books and one in each genre right away. What?
Casey just has she has writing ADD. She just like, oh, squirrel, let me write this new genre. I'm convinced
you're not wrong.
I'm convinced if you told her there was a new genre out, she'd be suddenly thinking of ideas for it if it just came out tomorrow.
We could probably meme her into creating a new genre if we just gave her a couple pieces.
I bet we could get her to do lit RPG.
That might be our new project. But all right, so we will wait till she gets here to torture her. We are trying to get her on the episode, people, but she's in Japan and time zones are a thing, so it's tricky. But Cisca, you've got one last question.
What is it that you love about the science fiction genre? Because this book really is more science fiction.
Yeah, well, it's written like a fantasy novel, but it is a science fiction novel.
It is very classic, and that's what I loved about Dune and Anne McCaffrey. They're both people who take shut up, JR. They're the people who take fantasy tropes and they put them in the science fiction setting, and it's really nice.
Well,
shut up, JR. Look at the scroll bar, and you'll understand why I'm telling him. Shut up.
Yeah, there it is. I said it was only okay, I guess. But as far as the genre goes, I mean, you get this at bare minimum, right? You're playing with big ideas, right? And this is another cliche answer, but you're talking about, how society holds together, what it would look like if things were different, right? And also honor, love, truth, the sort of great, questions. But you're also doing it with robots and laser swords and wizards and all. And how could you do it without those things? I wouldn't write any other genre because real life doesn't have wizards in it, except maybe metaphorically, and they aren't as cool. And so to offer a way out of stupid reality, to borrow a Simpsons phrase, is I think maybe the best thing that we can do as science fiction fantasy writers, because Lord knows reality is stupid sometimes, if not all the time. And so getting out of it for a little while and helping other people get out of it for a little while sure is a blast.
Okay, that's a good answer. So what was your first memory? You said that you remember for the movies it was the Star Wars, and for the books it was the fantasy, but was there any engagement before that strikes you? Games that you maybe played before then, cartoons you watched before, or is your formidable memory, is it that Star Wars?
Those are the big ones, right? But I remember also, I mean, I grew up a kid in the 90s, so there were Disney movies, right? I was a big fan of Sleeping Beauty in particular, which I know is kind of not cool anymore, but it had a dragon fight in it, right? Unlike most Disney movies, there was something for me there.
St. George approves.
Yeah. I should have worn my jacket as a St. George pin on it.
That. I made my poor mother make me that dress when I was younger.
It's a great movie. So maybe I could point there. I'm trying to think of some other things. It's a little bit later, but I was a big Legend of Zelda fan. So I still play all those games. And those are very classic fantasy in their construction. So all of those things sorted together. Because I can point to a number of video games that have influenced my writing. But those are later influences. So to go back, it'd really be those things.
Okay. So were your parents big sci-fi fans? You think that, or their interest influenced you, or did you develop that independent?
No, they are, but mostly films. My dad likes Star Wars a lot. My dad's also a big actual space science guy. So I think I've seen Apollo 13 as many times as I've seen Star Wars, right? I get updates on every SpaceX launch from my dad. I don't have to Google anything. He just messages it to me. I'm like, oh, cool, awesome.
My son is going to think that I'm say this about me because I'm the person who I'm at work. It's the pandemic and he's at home and I'm at work and I'm like, you need to go put on YouTube Live. He needs to go watch this launch.
It's cool stuff,
It is.
So I grew up with a lot of that because my dad's an engineer. But my mother was also really into 80s B fantasy movies. So I got
wrong with that.
No, oh gosh, no, they're the best. So I've seen every time I get a couple new friends, I force them to watch the Beastmaster, right? Because they need to be exposed to it. So obviously Conan, right? Highlander was a big one. My mother loves Highlander. So I got this
love the show. So much fun.
This weird mix of the really technical and actual spaceflight stuff from my dad and the Beastmaster. But it was none of it really literary. My parents read to me when I was a kid, Harry Potter and things, but I mostly read on my own. And started reading probably things my teachers wouldn't have wanted me to. I read Lord of the Rings maybe in second grade. I read it really early. And teachers have a weird tendency to be like, oh, that's too advanced for you, and they shouldn't do that. It's better to let kids fail at reading than discourage them. But I fortunately didn't have that many teachers who said things like that to me.
I
And so
can't imagine you would have listened to them.
I no, probably not.
So how did your love of science fiction transition into you writing stories, novels?
Actually really early too. We played make believe at recess, not being the sort of people who were really fit for, even in second grade, fit for football. And so while my friends started to age out of make believe, in fifth grade, in middle school, I just kind of kept writing because I've always been I was the last kid in America who was really bullied for being a nerd before being a nerd was cool. And I know there still are kids who are, right, but it was right as the culture was sort of making that transition to mainstreaming a lot of geek stuff. But I stayed and kept writing, at recess, and I never really stopped. I'd finish a story, right? My book was 5 pages long. I was in second grade, and I would throw it out, and third grade me would start again, make it to 20 pages, because second grade me was an idiot. How dare he think that was any good? And I kept doing that until I finished something that was actually novel length in middle school. It's unreadable, but I finished it. And then I did that all the way through high school and into college. And then my last year of college, I started interning at Bane. But I was also querying agents because I didn't want to use my internship as a sort of nepotism, backdoor kind of thing. So I was querying agents traditionally, as I didn't know I was going to get hired either. And I didn't want, it also felt inappropriate to show my boss, I'm writing this book. You're not paying me. Can I, so I didn't do that. And then I ended up getting both a job and a separate publishing deal right after I graduated.
They were pretty close together, if I recall correctly.
The same week, actually. I got the job on Monday, and then Thursday I sold the book. And so I've had this weird dual life ever since, where I've had a publisher, and then I've had my employer, and Bane has been very supportive of my publishing. They helped me get a lot of the authors who did blurbs for me on the back cover were because Bane helped me, my own publisher. We got a couple through them, but I think I got twice as many through my Bane friends as I did through my publisher at the time, which was just awesome. It's been great. Sort of ended up having sort of 2 author communities as that I've grown up in as a consequence.
The book is really, really good, and it doesn't read like a first-time book.
Well, thank you. And it's not, right? It's like a 30th time book. Yeah.
So it is a fabulous one, and I do truly enjoy it. And it's actually really awesome to see that some of these authors like David Drake, they're fans of yours, like truly fans of your writing. And so that's my brute force segue into talking about.
We've got one more question.
You're
jumping the gun a little bit. So
I'm happy.
Many authors let their own real life experiences influence the stories they tell. You got started writing so young that, I don't know how much life you have by the time you're 22, but you managed to get a book out there that people seem to like. So were there any specific formidable moments that shaped you as a storyteller?
I can't really think of one, right? Because I do feel weird hanging out with writers like David Drake, right? I wasn't in Vietnam. I haven't been in the military. I haven't been to space. I haven't advised, any governments. I work with a lot of writers at Bane who have these incredible life experiences, and I don't stack up, right, in those departments. I am just a kid who read a lot and who likes writing. And so I really have just sort of kept doing the work, right? But I just an ordinary kid growing up in the 90s and the aughts. And, I went right into the industry. I literally, I was working in publishing before I graduated college, and I sold the book like 2 weeks after I got out. So no, some people have plenty of life by 22, but not me. I'm not Alexander the Great. No.
Who is really? Who is?
Nobody. No.
Well, so you're fairly on in the series. So have you had any really neat things happen from a fan angle? Any cool fan art? A cosplay, maybe?
Nothing like that, but I have gotten, you get these cool letters, right? From people who say things like, hey, my girlfriend kicked me out of my apartment, and I didn't have anything except a backpack, and I happened to have a copy of the book, and that helped me get through, a couple weeks until I could get back on my feet, and thank you for that, right? And getting those letters, right? Is really cool, right? This is probably it's probably cooler than getting the artwork. I have gotten a couple pieces of artwork pretty recently, and those are cool too. But those actual little bits of human connection are really really neat. And it's nice to know too, because like I said at the beginning, right? Like these are just stories about robots and wizards, right? None of it's real. It's the dirty secret fiction writers shouldn't say, but none of it's real. But that it helps people in these very specific contexts is really really something, and that means a lot to me.
And so have you been asked out for your autograph out in public, away from a convention or a regular book signing? Because I know you've done that.
Not spontaneously, but I did have a reader who was coming through town, asked if I'd meet him at a bookstore to sign for Christmas. So before we were all locked in our houses, I used to go to Barnes and Noble and write all the time, so it wasn't out of my way. And that was cool, but it's not happened spontaneously. Authors aren't visually famous, except maybe like Stephen King. I guess George Martin, people recognize the hat anywhere, but no, I haven't gotten anything, just like walking down the street.
So have you spotted someone reading your book in the wild though?
I have actually. I was at Powell's in Portland. I was on a tour with DJ Butler. We were driving around the West Coast, and I walked up to the sci-fi section to go sign the shelf copies, right? And there was a guy standing there looking through it, and I was like, "Oh, that one's pretty good." And then I started signing the other ones, and he caught on, and it was pretty neat.
So
that's awesome.
I understand, and I don't like. So from the indie side, we don't really deal with this a lot. But when you sign books at the bookstore, is there any kind of process? Because don't they have to authenticate that that's the real signature? Don't they have to have some sort of process, or how does that work?
No, they really don't. If someone were to walk in and say, "Hey, I want to sign the Bible," they would be pretty sure you weren't, Moses or depending on which part you were signing. But if someone comes in and says, "Yeah, I'm that guy," they're like, "Yeah, we don't care." So I usually will just grab the books off the shelf and walk up to the desk and be like, "Hey, can I sign these for you? I'm the author." And if it's the hardcovers, it can at least show them the picture. But I've never been asked for ID or anything, so I just sign the things and go. I'm not suggesting you go pretend to be Brandon Sanderson or anybody, but you could theoretically get away with it because it's not exactly Fort Knox. But no, so I'll just go in and do that. They're usually pretty happy to have something interesting to do. So
I will tell you, having been, because I spent 2 years as a sales clerk at Barnes and Noble, go and tell, if you're listening to this and not going, that would be fun as an author, go in and tell them that you're doing it, because they'll put the autograph sticker on it. And then there are people who will come in and just buy it because it's signed.
Yeah. And sometimes too, the booksellers will they'll put them face out. They'll put them on end caps. They'll put them on the front table.
Do.
And especially if you're traditionally published and you're just starting out, that's a really useful way to get a couple extra copies moved. I'm trying to get a lot of our new writers to go and do that more and more, especially coming out of lockdown. Right, the bookstores need a little bit of the boost, and everybody wins in that situation. So it's fun. It's just fun.
I will say I did influence the Cumberland Barnes and Noble enough that they still put Bane books out as default.
Awesome. Doing God's work, Cisca.
I just like the books.
All right. So since she's distracted giggling and snorting, do you have any funny or weird interactions with fans since you started writing?
Yeah, I got one. There was a lady from Germany, because my books are out in a couple languages, who messaged me and said the usual stuff. I really like your book, and then she said at the end, "I want to ask you a question, so that I know no one else will have asked, so that you remember me." And I was like, "Oh no!" And she asked if I was ticklish, and I'll be damned, but I haven't forgotten that exchange. Uh,
That's hilarious.
and that is
Well
a
done,
weird.
Madam Fraulein.
That is
Well
a
done.
Yeah, that is a weird question to get, transatlantically. Uh, but it worked. I have not forgotten her. No,
So did you answer?
I did, but I'm not going to right now.
Because you'll know I'll remember it later. When eventually we go and see each other at a con.
Yeah,
So-
no, I'm not revealing my secrets. No.
All right. There are ways to get you to talk. So this is the part of the interview, dear listener, where we talk about all the wonderful things Christopher Ruocchio has written. So we're going to ask you to give us the highlights of your writing career.
Okay, yeah. So I've only done the one series so far. It's called The Sun Eater. It's a space opera, but it's written in the style of an epic fantasy, just in terms of the way the actual chapters are structured. The way the characters speak, that sort of thing. But it's set in the far, far future. We're talking like 20,000 years out. My main character is a nobleman, becomes a knight. His name is Hadrian, and he has written these books as a memoir. He wants to be a scholar, right, and to go out there and seek out strange new worlds and new civilizations. But he ends up stuck instead in the middle of a war between the human empire and an alien race called the Cielson. And because it is written as his memoir, he tells us on page 1 that he is the man who ended that war and destroyed all of the Cielson. This is him writing his tell-all story, because there are things that no one knows, right? Why and how, things like that. I like to say that it's sort of like Star Wars if Anakin becoming Darth Vader were his best possible option. The first book's called Empire of Silence. It came out in 2018. Howling Dark is book 2. Demon in White is number 3. And I just finished a couple weeks ago the first draft of Kingdoms of Death, which is the 4th one. There will be one more after that.
So how did you come up with the idea for this? You told us, since obviously this is the only thing you've written, that makes asking what we're going to talk about really, really easy. But whereas it's psychedelics, a Ouija board, bad North Carolina barbecue, how did this story idea come to you?
Boredom. I hated math class.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Who
So
doesn't?
there are a couple real nerds out there who do.
I'm the only one in my family who hated math class.
Yeah, my grandfather loved it and got all up on my case for not being good at it. But
You're really good at writing, so take that to the bank.
yeah, I think I'm doing okay. But no, I just wrote on the back of my notes, right? People, there's that story about Tolkien getting bored grading exams, and he wrote, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit," on the back of one, and just started daydreaming. I did that, but I wasn't grading exams, I was taking them. And so my math notebooks pretty often will be, equations on the left side where I'm half-assedly paying attention, and a bunch of gibberish about planets and kingdoms and aliens on the others. I don't know where those notebooks ended up. I assume my mother has them somewhere. But I did this sort of in pieces. I don't know when what I was writing became the Sun Eater books, because I started out writing literally like a Tolkien copy, right? It was an epic fantasy. And then over the years, it's slowly turned into a science fiction story. Actually, because of some of those video game influences that I mentioned, there's JRPG called Tales of Symphonia, where the big twist midway through, because Japanese literature relies on a big tonal shift in the middle usually, and so you see in a lot of Japanese games there's a big twist reveal moment midway through, and the reveal in this one was you thought you were playing a fantasy game with elves, but you weren't, dummy. This is a science fiction story. And I realized, oh, I don't actually have to do one or the other. And as I grew up, it transitioned into something that looks a lot more like a classic, sort of Dune, even John Carter, Jack Vance kind of far future. Well, not John Carter's not far future, but Vance is sort of. They used to call them planetary romances, not romance in the romantic sense, but in the romantic poetry, like 18th, 19th century sense. Big ideas, big adventure. but they don't call it that so much anymore. We say science fantasy. So it sort of turned into that over time.
So did you ever get caught doodling instead of taking
Oh,
notes?
sure. Yeah. In most of my classes, it wasn't an issue because my grades were fine. My math teachers weren't very happy, but the history teachers are like, "Well, let it slide this time since you did okay on that last exam." But yeah, every now and then it got me in trouble, but not that often.
Well, it looks like it worked out for you in the end. So before we dig in, we like to talk about the cover. So while I ask you the question, I'm gonna let you answer, and then I'll pull the cover up so the viewers can see it. But did you get to pick the cover for this book, or did the publisher?
It was a bit of both. Usually, in traditional publishing, the author doesn't get a say really at all. With Bane, that's the case. Toni Weisskopf picks the covers, she assigns the artists, and then we go from there. Very occasionally, we'll bring an author in for details. I know, like David Mattingly and David Weber worked real close getting the Manticore uniforms right for Honor Harrington. But for me, actually, I was really surprised. They asked me if I had any. Artists, rather, not authors, any artists that I wanted to work with. I gave them a list. I actually got, for the first book, I got the one I wanted, which was Sam Weber, who is no relation to David. Absolutely brilliant artist. He's done work for, he did the Dune Folio edition. He did the Gene Wolfe New Sun Folio editions. He's done some work for Neil Gaiman. Just really awesome artist. And we went back and forth a lot, talking about some ideas. At one point, the sales force intervened and decided we're putting a helmet on him. No, you don't get a say in it. But there was, they wanted people to just sort of see themselves in the figure on the cover. So they figured no face would do that. I mean, the helmet's cool, so no objection from me.
I mean, they did a nice job.
But I got some input. It was originally a Gladiator Thracian helmet, which is the one with the big longitudinal crest, not like the Centurion one behind me. And I said, no, I don't do the crest because I don't like Thracian helmets. And they were like, oh, okay, fair enough. But there was a little bit of back and forth. But ultimately, the publisher was like, okay, it's time to stop, author. Shut up. We got to get this to press. So
why don't you like Thracian helmets? I think they're all cool.
I just don't think they look cool. I don't like the giant fin.
Okay, fair enough.
I like the horsehair crest, but the big metal fin looks silly to me.
All right, fair enough. Well, since you didn't get to pick, we'll skip that question and we'll move to the important one. For the genre that you write in, and I know you're one of the heretics who don't think genre is a thing, but let's pretend for a second that you do think genre is a thing.
He thinks genre is a thing. He doesn't think subgenre is the way Amazon does them to the little minutia is a thing.
That's closer. But what's the question?
So what do you think makes a good cover for the genre you write in?
Oh man. That's a good one. I think the thing that makes a good cover generally for a start is that it should be kind of distinctive at a distance. This is especially true in traditional publishing. If you've got a whole bunch of covers lined up on the shelf and you're walking across the store, you want one that people can see, at 20 paces, right? And having the sort of monochrome, the one color like this, and it's not too cluttered, I think really works to my advantage, because a lot of science fiction covers don't look like these do, right? This looks more like a fantasy cover. And so I think it grabs a couple of people who think it's going to be a fantasy book for a second until they see the two moons and the the laser sword. And so I think it stands out a little bit on its own, but I do think the sort of color statement, and this is true for like any cover, right? I think I haven't read them, but like the V.E. Schwab books where they're all like bright white, you see those at like 100 paces. So you're like, what the hell is that? And you go look at it, and whether or not the cover is to your taste or not, once you pick up a book, the odds physically pick up a book, the odds that you're going to get it go up significantly. So I think that really helps. But as far as in science fiction particularly, my personal taste is anything that's not just another spaceship, right? Every science fiction cover is just a generic spaceship. We do a lot of those at Bane, and they work, right? Those they're people for whom that works. I did not want spaceships on these books because I wanted to do something different, and my publisher was fortunately open to that idea.
Conventional wisdom says that Spaceship Ass sells books.
Yeah, it does. But
not all sci-fi is about space ships.
Well, then you have the
naval
Space
aspect.
Marines, and they throw those on the cover. Well, in this case, Space Gladiator look, but
yeah, it hasn't hurt me. But it has made its own sort of statement, which I think has been to my benefit. I haven't had anyone say they didn't like the covers.
I think the cover is really great.
No.
That I'd frame it and hang it in my room if it was my cover.
I have the original actually.
Oh, nice.
It's in black and white. It did the color digitally, so I got this black acrylic painting down the hall. Unfortunately, I can't pull it up, but
that's cool though.
Yeah.
So, give us the 30-second pitch about this book.
Well, separate from the general series pitch, which we talked a little bit about, this one is sort of a classic coming of age, finding your place in the universe story. Hadrian does not want to be who his father wants him to be, so he leaves, and things do not go well for him. Right, and he ends up, very broad spoiler. He has to be a gladiator, right, and he falls into a bunch of weird misadventures, court intrigue. He runs afoul of some bureaucrats, right, and gets involved in a bunch of problems. And then there are the aliens thrown in there as well. So it's all him trying to figure out who he's supposed to be and determining whether or not there is a bigger destiny for him. Whether or not there is something I leave to the reader to find out. Although, of course, there are more books, so that should give you a clue.
So is this Hadrian in all three?
No, these are different characters.
Okay.
It's the Emperor on Demon in White, and who it is on Howling Dark, I won't say. Bit of a surprise when you get there. We're working on the cover for the next one now, and it's finally going to have one of the aliens on it, which I'm very excited about.
That's cool. So
we'll have that soon, I hope.
A lot of people think that this is a very Dune-esque universe. Did you do it on purpose? Was it accidental?
Oh no, it was on purpose. No, how could it not be, right? Like I said, I've always been a big Dune fan. It's another one I read, not quite as much as Lord of the Rings, but I read a lot. And so I love the world, right? I love the big galactic empire. I like the warring houses, the feudalism. I like the sword fights, right? And so I took a couple basic world building cues in setting this up. There are sword fights, there are shields, so that guns aren't as useful, although they are used way more than they are in Dune, actually. And so I took a couple nods because Frank Herbert has a certain attitude towards heroes and towards great leaders, and it's not one that I agree with. And so I wanted to set up the comparison so that the contrast would become clear as the stories moved on.
Okay, so how does he feel about heroes?
Frank does not like them, right? And this is something that's kind of actually hard to get from the first Dune book because it's mostly in the little epigraphs that start the chapters. But Paul is not the good guy, right, in Dune.
So now, how do you feel about the movie with this? Because I think the original movie with Patrick Stewart in it, you don't see that. But I think in the miniseries with Sci-Fi, you see where he really punishes Paul.
It comes through a little bit better. I like the miniseries. The production's a little janky, but it's a little bit more true to the text. Although I gotta be honest, I don't hate the David Lynch version, but I just like David Lynch so much.
So what do you think of the new version? They're still working on it, right?
I'm pretty optimistic. It's in post. They did some reshoots. It's coming out.
It has Jason Momoa's abs in it, so it can't be too bad, right?
Yeah, although I don't know. That's the one casting choice I'm not sure about. Duncan Idaho, Jason Momoa has like the acting range of a teaspoon. He's got like the one character he plays. It's a cool character, but it's also not Duncan. I guess it is Duncan, but it's not hate, right? It's not the Dune Messiah Duncan. So if they keep going, I'm very skeptical.
Well, hopefully he will surprise us.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to be proved wrong. I'm not going to clutch my scruples. But and I don't like it. It's not like I hate Aquaman or Stargate Atlantis, but
Stargate is awesome.
Speaking of, damn right,
he did a good job in Game of Thrones.
So, did you like the follow-on books that Herbert's son has done?
They're not my favorite. I like the prequel ones, the Butlerian Jihad, all right. I think if they weren't Dune, I would like them even better. I'm not as keen on the sequels, but I don't want to speak too ill of
So,
Brian and
which
Kevin.
do you think influenced you more, the literary works or the media works?
From Dune, or
From Dune.
just in general? Oh, from Dune,
Yeah.
the books, definitely. Definitely the books, because like there's this sort of philosophical through line about the problems of leadership and heroism is something that you don't see as clear, particularly in the Lynch film, like you said, but it becomes really, really clear in the later books as you start to deal with Leto and Paul's Golden Path, that sort of thing. Um, and I just never found it persuasive because I don't think that you can get away from those great heroes, right? I think that and from leadership, I just don't think that everything could just be flat, right? That people could just exist. I think structures get imposed whether we like them or not, and you have to sort of accept that as sort of a feature of the landscape. So if Frank Herbert was asserting that heroes are bad, I want to be saying with these books, if I'm saying anything on a philosophical level, okay, Frank, I hear you, heroes are bad, but what if we need them anyway? Can they still be, good despite that? And that's
Well,
what I
think
want to try and answer with the story.
I definitely agree with you. I think in some level we need heroes. We need the example and the idealism.
Well, you see this with the reaction to Dune, right? Like, especially, I think a lot of people drop off reading Dune Messiah and Children of Dune because it starts to take Paul apart. And in the first book, you never see him do anything that bad. He's fighting against these, terrifyingly awful people that, killed his father and destroyed his home, basically. And he's driving them off of a world with the help of the natives, right? Like everything about Paul's actions in the first book's pretty much coded heroically, right? He doesn't even want power, right? He's afraid of seizing everything because he's become this terrible monster. But then we get to the second book and we still haven't seen him do anything that bad. It's like how Star Wars fans can support the Empire, and that like baffles some people, but they don't actually do anything that evil on screen. They blow up Alderaan, but we have no context for what it is. And it's also a legitimate military target, but I digress.
So let's bring this back to your book. Do you
Yeah.
show when your opening makes it almost sound like Hadrian? I love that name, by the way. Did he build a wall? He should build a wall. But,
but
okay, well, you should get on that. But it makes it sound like he's committed some sort of mass genocide almost with the way you did your intro. So do you actually show him being bad? Because like in Han, for instance, if we go to the Star Wars example, they tell us what a roguey is, but then you see him do nothing roguish, right? Like he's not doing anything bad. So you set up the premise that Hadrian is the not really the big bad, but the guy that did the big bad thing that had to get done. So do you actually show that in action, or is that something that happens in the background and you allude to it?
Oh no, it's happening. I haven't gotten to that part yet. Like I say, he tells you on page 1 he does this thing, right? So it's not a spoiler. I haven't gotten to the actual writing of that part yet. Now there's like I said as well, right? There's some disjunction between what everybody says about him and what happened, right? That doesn't mean I'm going to blink necessarily on some of these things. He's done some pretty awful things already. But a lot of his reputation, or not a lot of his reputation, but some of his reputation is exaggerated. Some of it is hearsay. Some of it is rumor. Some of those rumors he starts himself, right? And so he becomes this sort of weird, shadow by the throne as the series progresses, and people don't know what to do with him, right? Including himself sometimes. And he puts together the classic crew of like misfits and cast-offs and dropouts and stuff. People the Empire doesn't approve of, and they're the sort of, and they're the dangerous guys, right? And so he has this sort of cloud over him as the series progresses. But no, he definitely does some things that he's not happy about, and he sees a lot of things that are also awful because the aliens aren't exactly angels.
So you have the armor that we showed briefly has very much a gladiatorial feel to it, and you've hinted that you actually said outright that he was a gladiator for a bit. So do you have shades of Spartacus in there? Because I notice you're a history lover as well, where the gladiators revolt, or
no, not so much Spartacus. There are some Colosseum scenes in a couple of the books that are styled after how the Roman contest went. Gladiators, of course, weren't weren't slaves themselves. They were professionally trained athletes. They were very expensive to maintain. That's not to say there weren't slaves who fought in the Colosseum, but they were usually, pitted against gladiators and show contests, right? Same as they'd go out to fight animals, because what the Romans were doing with the Colosseum was not just putting on a show and not just sporting, right? Because when gladiators fought, it was actually, it was a real contest. They didn't die as often as people think, and people were, trading, stats and bets and things and figuring out, Marcus is totally going to win because, he's been doing good lately. You look at the numbers, Stephanus. But they were also showing off that they were masters of the universe, right? So there's a lot of that angle too. We're going to bring in all these weird monsters, and we're going to bring in some captured Persians, and we're going to kill them to prove a point, right? About how Romans are in charge. And there's very much that sort of aspect of the arena in particularly in the first book, but not so much the Spartacus slave revolt.
Okay. All right, Cisca, the next one is yours.
What is it that makes your series really stand out and is special? I mean, yes, we understand the Doom and stuff, but there's more to it than just Doom, right?
Oh yeah, of course. I could talk about my influences all day, but the thing I think that makes it really special, and I don't want to pat myself on the back or anything, but it's all written in first person, right? So everything, and that's not unique by any means, but that means we get to spend.
It's not common either, though.
It's not, but we get to spend a lot of time with Hadrian himself, right? And so he's writing this at the end of his 1,000-year life, right? He's lived a really, really long time. Nobles in the empire lived for centuries, right? And so he is reflecting with all of his experience on himself at various stages in his life. So when he does something stupid because he's a kid, he says, yeah, this was stupid, but I was a kid. And you don't see a lot of that done in the genre, and certainly not on this scale, right? These are not small books.
No.
So we spend a lot of time with him. We spend a lot of time with the people he's with, and that attention to person is something that I've tried really, really hard to focus on, to spend time with. That's not to say, of course, there aren't cool battles. I think I write a mean sword fight. Weird aliens. I like also one of my projects with the series is each book they're all science fantasy novels, but they've all got kind of a different flavor to them. You would call them subgenres. But the first one has got the sort of sword and sandal, Roman gladiatorial vibe to it. The second one's more cyberpunky. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what subgenre do you think it fits into, or would we go book by book for you?
Yeah, I would go book by book, right? The second one is kind of more cyberpunk. It's also a little more gothic, right? Like not in the sense of goth music.
It looks more gothic on the cover, even.
Yeah, but
it has kind of that Ghost in the Shell.
I'm a big fan. Yeah. But it goes more in that direction. You've got the like big spooky place that they're in, the sense of isolation you get from a gothic novel. And then the third one is more like political thriller. And it's also more of an adventure novel. The fourth one's got some dystopia in it. And it's because we're looking at different parts of the universe. This is partially why I don't really think of these things as genres. I think of them as sets of tropes. Because they're not different stories. The story structure is not different.
So what tropes do you think you really hit on, either in a unique way or just really well?
I think I'm doing the like cyborg stuff differently than a lot of people are. I am very strongly of the opinion that if you start changing the way that your body is oriented or designed, that it's going to change who you are, right? It's one of the things I like about Spider-Man 2 is how plugging 4 arms into his back makes Otto Octavius a different person. Because you see this actually with rats. If you give them access to implants that let them control machines, it changes how they solve problems. And if you take those away, they can't do it anymore. If they've got a way to like open a jar with like a robot hand or something. And you see this too with people who get brain injuries, right? It changes who they are in certain ways. And so cyborging yourself isn't necessarily cool. It is in certain contexts tantamount to suicide. And so I've got characters who deal with that in different ways, and they'll change bodies, and that changes who they are, right? There's still some parts that are continuous between incarnations, right? But they become different people. And I haven't seen a lot of people doing that, but the science seems to suggest that be the case.
So the sci-fi community, I've noticed there's a strong love for the transhumanism movement, and it's very popular. But like you, I do question how that will change us fundamentally. I mean, if you just look at any pivotal piece of technology in history and how it's.
I have a friend who recently, this past summer, went through prophylactic mastectomies, and it was interesting because she had implants put in afterwards, but just the entire psychology about how she deals with her chest really changed. And and she was okay. She was comfortable with it. It was a choice she chose to make, and it changed her in things that she wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I hope she's all right.
Oh no, she's great. It was she just has a really bad family history of this. So her doctor and it was a couple year process,
right?
That she went through to make this decision, and I was with her throughout all of it.
I just didn't want to seem insensitive talking about how.
But no, but I mean, she and I talked a lot about how it changed in ways. She goes, as women, we want to cover certain aspects of ourselves, and she's like, it just doesn't feel like it's part of me. It's just different. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, and that's not even something that's changing, like actually changing her perceptions, like her senses, right? Or changing her neurochemistry.
She had implants put in afterwards, and just how and at each stage, because there's a stage point where you have to do some healing before you can go to the next stage.
Sure.
Just how we talked about it a lot in between. It was really interesting, and it definitely what you said really
you can see, right, how something more severe would like radically alter who a person is.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just like, yeah, I'll plug myself into a battleship and I'll be the same person. Like, it's not how it's going to work. The person because you're not just a brain, right?
Well, how you react is different.
Yeah. Well, you have these different tools plugged in, but you only really think the way you do because you have a body that interacts with the world. When they tried to design AI in the back half of the 20th century, they had a lot of problems because the AI couldn't figure out. They thought, like, if we just give them a camera, right, they can see, on this desk here, there's a microphone and some pens and a notepad, but they couldn't figure out objectness, right? Because they didn't have tools for interacting with the world. And so our consciousness, we don't perceive objects so much neurologically. We perceive the way we interact with objects. And if you don't have a body, right, or you have a body that interacts with objects differently, it fundamentally alters your method of interacting with the environment. And that can have consequences for your personality and for your sense of self in the first place. And so looking at stuff like that with these characters, now Hadrian doesn't cyborg himself, but with other characters, right? Because Hadrian is very skeptical of transhumanism. The whole empire is. It's one of the things that sets them apart from the other cultures in the galaxy. Is something that I'm really proud of the work I've done with that. I think it's really fun.
So you mentioned that your novels were rather long. So on a scale of Brandon Sanderson to Encyclopedia Britannica, where do your stories range for length?
They're actually sub-Brandon, but they are they're about 240,000 words on the small end to 300,000 on the large end.
Okay. For a reader, authors always send out this scale.
I know. Words. Yeah, I know. So
what does that mean page-wise? And I actually have your book, but it is not in this room.
So you said how long? We'll say 250,000. It's about 250 words a page. So I'll get the calculator because I don't do the math.
Yeah,
either.
it's here. Let me do it this
1,000
way.
pages?
Yeah, about 1,000 maybe, but they're, let's say, between Order of the Phoenix and A Game of Thrones, the first book.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that range.
You made me do the math today, Cisca, and I am not happy with you.
Yes, I win.
So, all right. Well, now, wow, an hour in, but we're going to start talking more in depth about the story. So, you told us a little bit about Hadrian and his experience coming from privilege to nothing and then rising back up from the ashes like a phoenix. So, that's what he did, but not necessarily who he is. So, what can you tell us about Hadrian, the character?
Well, starting out, Hadrian is a big old nerd. He really wants to get out into the galaxy. He is the son of this really tough provincial nobleman who's trying really hard to expand their family's virtues, get them, their own planet, and move out from under the heel of this other house. And Hadrian doesn't want anything to do with that. He doesn't want to be the person who, squeezes his peasants to death to get what he needs. And so he's trying really hard to get out of there. Doesn't really fit in with his family or with the whole culture, really. And he knows there are these cool aliens, and he can't figure out why there hasn't been peace made, right? As so many naive young people do. Can't work out why the adults haven't fixed everything. And so he tries to go out there and fix it. And Lord, he runs into every problem in the book. But he's been schooled in diplomacy. He speaks a lot of different languages. He's very interested in the other parts of the galaxy, the human universe, and the aliens. And it's one of the things that really sets him apart with the other people he runs into is he actually can speak the aliens' language. He bothered to learn it in school. Because he has being a nobleman, he has a fancy tutor. Most of the casual nobility are not interested in it. They're they're not trying to be involved in the war. That's for the the patrician military class, who are underneath the palatine super nobles. But he also is a pretty good swordsman. He doesn't like fighting starting out, but he has a brother he wants to be better than, as so many of us do. I love my brothers, but
But which one
I wasn't
you
gonna
are.
let him beat me.
He said, but the one you're talking about, he knows who he is.
Oh yeah, no, I know they both know. But I wasn't gonna let them. I wasn't gonna let them beat me in a sword fight. No, not with those Star Wars, lightsabers, circa 2001.
Dude, those hurt when you get hit on the hand hard with them.
You're damn right they do.
That's why we wear hand armor, Cisca.
Yeah, but oh man, what else can I say about him? But no, he really doesn't want to make this difference. But he has to sort of get broken down and face reality as the series goes on. And he is, he's pretty he's pretty introspective, but he's also prone to these really grandiose, over the top, dramatic moments where if he can set up the one-liner, he absolutely will, no matter how serious the situation is. And those scenes are usually fun for me too. So
in real life, the one-liners never come to you till it's wildly inappropriate and the moment has passed.
They never. Yeah, you're right. But I'll remind you, he is writing this years later, so whether or not he's reporting accurately is up to the reader.
Okay, fair enough. So were there any especially memorable secondary characters from when you were writing this? And I realize you're on your fourth book already. That's already done. And so pinpointing just book one secondary characters might be difficult. But so just over the course of the series, are there any especially memorable secondary peeps? Yeah, sure.
So for the first book, that is, the big one is Valka, who's the big love interest for the series. She is a xenoarchaeologist from a different country in the galaxy. She actually has some of these cybernetic implants. She's got a perfect memory. She can remember everything she's ever seen. So this has some fun stuff, right? So she actually reads books by just looking at them briefly and then recalling the information, which is kind of a neat trick. So there's a bit where she goes through a library just flipping pages really fast and then leaves. But she does not like the Empire. She does not like that Hadrian is this sort of stuffy aristocrat. She thinks he's full of himself. Doesn't like social hierarchy. She's a bit of a communist. Not exactly, but she's got a lot of those sorts of critiques of the Empire. So she and Hadrian do not get along at first, and they sort of talk around each other, and those are really fun conversations as they sort of break their worldviews against each other, and both of them figure out what they're wrong about, because no one is right all the time. I don't want my characters to be preaching at their readers. I want them to both be wrong. I want them to be characters who have these complex ideas about things, and to not be perfect. And so they don't agree on anything, and it's that was real fun to do. Yeah, and she's all up on the great, alien mystery, right? There's an ancient civilization that she's been investigating for a long time. Hadrian doesn't know that there's supposed to be an ancient civilization because the Empire has been covering that up. And so she, teaches him some things, but he also proves that maybe, hey, noblemen aren't that bad. Maybe the Empire's got some points. Maybe sometimes the aliens are bad news, right? And so that's a really fun relationship that sort of grows over the course of the books. And he's got a whole bunch of gladiators that he drags with him when he, finally pulls himself out of the pit again. And they're really fun. I've gone to a boxing gym, or I went to a boxing gym before the world closed for years. So they've got a lot of that same sort of presence that you get from people you hang out with at boxing gyms and stuff. Kind of rough guys. And Hadrian's the sort of out of place weirdo in the group, right? And so that dynamic's fun too. They sort of learn, maybe he's not that useless. Not too bad with the sword, right?
So speaking of the sword, you live by the sword, die by the sword. Does your series have any bad guys that you can tell us about, or is the universe itself a bad
guy? The universe itself isn't evil, but there is evil in it. No, the big one, right? Obviously, are these aliens, right? The Cielsen are a species of purely carnivorous, 8-foot tall humanoids that live in these migratory asteroid ship clusters that travel between the stars. They will fall on a planet, and they will spend years sieging it and harvesting whatever they can or whoever they can. And they've been hassling the Empire now for about 300 years by the time the story starts. And you can see where this might be a problem. And so they've got this warrior culture, right? They don't think like we do. They are aliens. They can't, for instance, understand the idea of reciprocity or trade. They just take things. So there's some weird alien cultural psychological breakdowns that happen. It's one of the things Hadrian has to learn to deal with. Their leader doesn't really show up for a little bit. Is this sort of he's sort of like the anti-Hadrian in a way. He is as grandiose as Hadrian himself, and they have this cool sort of mutual respect antagonistic relationship as the series goes on. And he's been it has been really fun to write. Its name is Siriani. And then there are some human villains as well. Without giving a name, there is because it's kind of a spoiler. There is a king of this secret planet. There's a group called the Extrasolarians. They live between the stars, hiding out sort of in the backwoods of the galaxy, if you will. Because the Empire wants all the good star systems with the actual stars that people can live with, and the planets that are habitable and nice. And people who don't want to deal with the Empire live anywhere else, right? And so there's this one lost planet, if you will, the king of which is this several thousands year old cyborg who has been slowly changing his nature over the years in order to continue living. And he is spooky, and that was a real fun fun villain to write. And there, of course, there's your your average bureaucrat does not like Hadrian and his weird way of doing things. And there's some intrigue at court. People don't trust him. People want him gone because he's too popular. He's too interesting. He's causing too much trouble, right? So sort of got villains from all sides, really.
I do like the villain that sounds like Space Locust. That sounds the coolest. So the speaking of characters, so you've put Hadrian through a lot of bad stuff, you as the author and the creator of this world. So if he met you in a back alley, because we like to ask our authors, what do you think he would do to you?
I would be dead.
I mean, he's taken some boxing, you said, so maybe you could last a few rounds.
Maybe if it were early Hadrian, book 1 Hadrian, I could maybe a few seconds, maybe a minute or two tops. But quarantine's really done a number on my condition. But by book 4, no, I'm dead. Especially after book 4, he would not like me. So that's a little bit of a teaser.
All right.
Oh my goodness.
Well, you've already answered describing the universe, so we're going to move on. And 33 is you.
So it's a series. We've talked about that. Will there be more from these characters? You said book 5, but do you think you might do some like novellas, some freestanding ones?
Yeah, well, I already have. I did a short. It's technically a novel. It's like 55,000 words, but I did a short novel called The Lesser Devil. That's about Hadrian's little brother Crispin, who's been sort of forgotten about, left at home, left to deal with his own problems. I wrote it over like a week, a couple of years ago, before book 2 came out. Actually, I put it out not too long ago, and I just wanted to do something lighter, sort of an action story. He's got to defend his family from some old grudges back at home, and that was really fun. What was really fun about it too is that his brother in that isn't the character that Hadrian portrays him to be, as they were growing up together. So there's a little bit of a disjunction, right, between Hadrian's version of the story and his brother's description of himself. And I want to play with that sort of thing, right? Because you see that a lot in like real histories, right? You got one biography that's like, oh, the Spanish were evil, and then you read the next one, and you're like, oh, maybe they weren't that bad, and like, oh, this was written by the English. I see. They don't like the Spaniards. That makes sense. So I want to play with that sort of perspective in history when writing these different books. So I'm doing a story now that's written by a historian about a bit from book 1, and it does not match book 1 at all, right? So I like to play with things like that. But I'm going to do some other stuff like that moving forward, and some standalone stuff in the universe too.
Now, would that be published with Tor as well, or would that be something you throw out yourself?
With DAW, and
Sorry,
it depends.
DAW.
Yeah, it depends on the length. If it's a full length novel, I'll traditionally publish it. But if it's shorter, because traditional publishing won't really take anything under 80,000 words, just because that's not what their market is really interested in. The shorter stuff I've been indie publishing.
Okay, that's neat.
Yeah.
So you're going to be hybrid, and that works. So we've talked some about the universe, but do you have any consistent rules of technology? Or, I mean, it's a sci-fi book, but you say you have some fantasy. So is there any magic in it?
Well, I don't know if I want to call it magic necessarily.
Or
but
just not well explained science.
There is some stuff that Chuck Gannon and David Weber would give me hell for. Let's say they would not. But no, I try not to break too many laws of physics. If I'm gonna break something like faster than light travel, right, I'm going to come up with something that sounds relatively plausible, right? That I use a kind of warp drive. Which I know you saw the news, they're making some progress on, right? Which is very exciting. So it's not like, we'll just punch it, Chewie. We're gonna get to the next planet in 10 minutes. None of that. As useful as that is for film pacing. But no, the thing I'm maybe most proud of, right, is I fixed the lightsaber. I've got because I love lightsabers, they're cool, but I'm not holding a 5,000 degree bar of plasma in my hand, right? I'm certainly not holding a laser beam and waving a flashlight around, cutting my own arms off. So I've come up with this and this is totally speculative, right? But I've come up with this sort of fake metal that uses most matter is 3 quark, like a proton's 3 quarks, a neutron's 3 quarks. There are exotic forms of matter that are 4 and 5 quark particles. They tend not to last very long, so I just imagined one that's 5 quark that makes a sort of weird liquid metal. This way, I can use something that works like a lightsaber that I can retract and do fun tricks with, and it won't burn my hand off. But then But rather than focus on the mechanics of how it works, right? I kind of hand wave that stuff. I'm more interested in how you'd use it and how that changes the sword fighting techniques, right? And so the sword fighting techniques are the sword fighting scenes are more interested in how, if you had a sword that could cut in any direction with no force, how would that change sword fighting, right? And those scenes I'm really proud of. But I also, even though I'm using FTL, it still takes years and decades to get across the galaxy. So people are freezing themselves. So characters are aging past each other. And some characters have longer lifespans than others because of their social class and things like that. So there's some weirdness to how time works for various characters that's been interesting to play with as well. And I think those things really help give the universe its distinctive character.
So do
hold
you
on.
have more than one alien? What?
I was going to ask you mentioned that people have different lifespans. Do you explain that away? Is it medical nanites? Is it access to better medicine?
It's a bit of a lot of things. In the case of they're broadly speaking, the Empire has 3 classes. There are your plebeians, which is you and I, just normal humans. The patricians are plebeians who've been uplifted. They've undergone some of its medical nanite surgeries, and other less sophisticated procedures to extend their lifespans. They might live to 200, maybe 250, 300. And then the Palatines, the sort of super nobles that I was talking about, are may live as long as 1,000 years, and they are very, very carefully gene tailored from conception to be able to do this. They're so complicated genetically that if they are not carefully monitored all the way up till birth, they'll have serious defects, right? The fallout of this is that if you are a nobleman and you want to have a kid, you have to have imperial permission, because the emperor controls all the gene keys. And that's how the empire holds itself together, despite there being, decades of travel across the empire, right? You would think it would break down, but it doesn't, because all of the powerful families need central approval to have children, which is an awful way of controlling people. And so if you get on the emperor's bad side, your whole line is ended, as has happened to several houses. And so this is one of Hadrian's things too, right? Is that he's in love with someone who's not from the empire, so he's not getting any approval to have kids, and it really weighs on him. And so they because if they tried, normally the kid would have pretty serious issues, and there are characters who are the results of those circumstances who have some pretty serious problems, right? Because of it, and as I say, it's a really unfortunate way to run an empire, but I guess if it holds things together.
So we've talked about a lot of that, which is great. And did you say whether or not we have more than one alien creature?
There are a few alien races. The Sealson are the big one. There are a couple others that show up. The Sealson are the only aliens in the history of humankind, this future history, that have ever been technologically sophisticated on our level. The rest are behind us. Usually they haven't even discovered space flight yet. So there's one in book 1 called the Umand, who are, as far as we can tell, maybe not even intelligent. They have some sort of weird way of communicating. That's almost like they sort of think with sound, so they can like sync up and communicate with each other. But they have not built any sophisticated civilization. There is an ancient civilization that is gone, they're referred to only as the Quiet, and I won't say much about them because there's nothing I can really say without spoiling things, except that they existed at some point. And there's another species turns up in book 3 called the Urktani, who are sort of bird-like. They can fly. They were kind of a medieval culture that got uplifted and is sort of working in the imperial legions. as auxiliaries, basically the way the Romans would bring in non-Roman peoples and have them fight for them. And if they, did their time, they could become citizens. So you kind of got the whole gamut here. The Cielsen look kind of humanoid, but they don't think like us. The Yurtani don't look human, but we can get along. And the Umand, who the heck knows?
So how did you go about creating these guys? Was it whole cloth? Bad sushi?
It's closer to bad sushi. You get like one idea, right? Like, oh, what if I have one that's got like, 3 legs and no arms and sort of makes noise? I don't know. What do you do with that? And then you sort of grow from there. I knew I wanted ones that could fly because that would be cool. And so I worked on growing the Urktani out of, I just wanted bird people. Having soldiers who could fly without jetpacks seems like a cool thing. Let's do it. Got enough jetpacks in science fiction. So, you start with a seed, right? And you work from there. I'm not one of those people who really, really obsessively world builds for like 30 years and then writes one book. I did a lot of that when I was growing up, in school and things. And now I'll just make up stuff when I need it. Because I got stuff to do, and it made me feel better when Lois Bujold says that's how she does it. She just doesn't change things after it's out, and I'm like, oh, phew, okay, I'm in good company.
Timeline never did. He never went back and relooked at things, apparently, or at least that's what I have been told by people who know more than I do.
Yeah, I wouldn't know either. That's new to me, but a lot of writers or people who want to be writers get stuck just spinning their wheels thinking, how does the coinage work in, imaginary England? And like, it's probably not going to be relevant. If it is, write it down, but like, don't start with coinage unless, you're going to do a book about it in some way. So.
Okay. So, was there anything, clearly we've been at this for a little bit, so we're winding this show down. Was there anything about the Empire of Silence or the Sun Eater series that we didn't ask you that you want to tell us before we move on?
I guess the only thing I should mention is that if you want to start the series somewhere, Empire of Silence is probably the best place to do it. You can get that short novel I mentioned, The Lesser Devil, for I think $3 on Amazon. If you want to start out there, get a sense of my writing, get a sense of the world. That's a good way to do it. And I'm also going to be putting out my first short story ebook sort of bundle here. If not by the end of March, certainly in April. I'm going to call it Tales of the Sun Eater. It's 6 reprints that have been in different anthologies I've done for Bane, and one all-new story that I really need to finish. I have been dragging my feet since I finished book 4. Book hangovers are bad for readers, but they're about 10 times worse when you're writing the damn things. So as soon as I get that done, that'll be out. You check me out on Amazon. You can check me out too on YouTube at Sun Eater Books. I do a live stream at least once a month talking to readers, and I put out videos about writing, about publishing, how things work. And, I did a workshop a couple days ago about outlining because I'm a big believer in outline. So if you're trying to be a writer, I try to do some writing advice online, and I hope to see you guys there.
So was there any other forms of media? So you've mentioned that you have your Dawes publisher, your ebook, paperback, hardback, in the works, and obviously they've got audiobooks because I've seen them. But are there any other forms of media coming out? Graphic novels, RPG
I
games?
could see this being a great RPG.
I would love that, but not just yet. I do know some folks in comics though, so fingers crossed.
Oh, that would be cool. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's good to know. And so if you want to know about the comics that are coming out, hopefully RPGs, you can pester him. But first, he's going to tell us how you can find him. So, Christopher Ruocchio, how can they find you?
The best one these days is the YouTube channel. I got off Twitter for my sanity and my soul. But I am on Facebook at The Ruocchio, TheRuocchio. I do not have an easy to spell last name. I should have maybe used a pen name. My wife keeps telling me, but you can find me on Facebook there. You can check me out at SollanEmpire.com, SOLLAN Empire.com. Check me out there. I got a newsletter. And you can send me emails there as well. There's not a letter I haven't answered yet. So,
all right. And you can find us on our website, anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blade. Blasters, Tack, and Tack Blades, anchor.fm. We've got our Twitters at twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. We have an email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com, and sometimes we even remember to check it. We do have our Facebook group, is facebook.com/Blasters and Blades podcast. There is a YouTube channel, and if you're watching this video, you found us. Unfortunately, until we get 100 subscribers, we just have a gobbledygook, like somebody took the alphabet soup, spilled it on a piece of paper, said, hey, that's your YouTube link. So if you want to make that easy for you to remember, you can hit the like, subscribe, and follow button over there on the YouTubes, on the interwebs, as the kids are saying these days. And Cisca, it is now time for you to bring it home. Oh, wait. And you could support the show if you want to help us keep the lights on as our Buy Me a Coffee /author J.R. Handley and Put in the Comments podcast. And all of that will go to the overhead and keep us bringing you these interesting conversations. And now for real this time, Cisca.
Well, thank you for spending your time with us. For Nick Garber, who was busy doing something like watching, what was it, Justice League, I think he said he was watching, the 4-hour thing. So, on behalf of our absentee buddy, Nick, J.R. Handley, my friend Chris, as well as myself, thank you for coming, spending time with us. We'll be back next week, same time, including our cheesy jokes, crazy one-liners, and nerd culture. And, of course, our love of all things that go boom.
All right. Goodbye.